Hi, welcome to Steve Wraith's True Crime Podcast, where I get on a former criminal or an author. And today I'm delighted to welcome Dale Brendan Hyde, a fellow author who has written many books, and we're going to have a chat about his life and about how he got into writing such wonderful books. Dale, how are you?
I'm good, mate. Steve, you all right?
Yeah, great to see you, mate. Did you have a good Christmas and New Year?
Yeah, good Christmas, mate. Just went to Edinburgh for a couple of days with the missus, little walkabout. Nice, quiet Christmas, quiet New Year, but intended.
Good stuff, mate. Okay, you've got a fairly strong accent, so let's go back to the beginning with you. Where were you born?
I was originally in Salford, Manchester. I don't talk all Manchester. Mum's from Yorkshire, so I've got most of my side of family Yorkshire, Sheffield, Leeds, Wakefield, York. That sort of area. But then all my dad's side are all like Salford. So bit of a mix.
Happy upbringing?
Yeah, good upbringing. Like my dad, I was all right. I mean, I don't blame my dad, but my dad sort of left to sort of go work on the rigs in Middle East and stuff when I was quite young. So I didn't really have my dad about when I was younger, but he were only going to sort of make more money, try and make a better family life. But in a way, I think, when you've not got your father around, it were a little bit, I kind of went off the rails a bit. Like I said, I don't blame him, but maybe if it had been there, he could have given me a crack round the ear. Maybe I needed it, you know what I mean? I just didn't have that. My mum really couldn't control me. So, I fell into like crime quite early, like young teenager.
Did you have brothers and sisters?
Yeah, I've got a sister, younger sister, 5 years younger, Stephanie. I've got an older brother who lives in Warrington, Darryl. Again, I don't see much of him. Never really had much to do with him. He don't really have much to do with my dad either. So it's a bit of one of them. We're kind of brothers. We speak like when we speak, brothers, but don't really. He's got his life. I've got mine. Like a lot of families, you're close to your families, but you don't. There's loads of uncles, aunties. You probably don't see as much of them as you'd like to. One of them.
So obviously, being brought up on the streets of Salford, it's got a reputation. We'll probably come to that as we talk. But I mean, first time at school. I mean, were you much of a scholar? Were you into schoolwork, or were you wagging off? What were you doing?
I wasn't really brought up in Salford. We were just there every weekend to visit like my dad's side of the family.
Right.
My dad moved over to like Wakefield because my mum won't move that way. So okay. I was brought up in West Yorkshire.
All right.
But then every weekend over the Pennines to Salford, Eccles, Earlham, Monton, Winton, them sort of areas. Do you know what I mean? I was all right at school. I was all right at school, but I would always, when you look back at your reports, they're always that same report. Got the talent, just don't apply himself. Everything's there. Not sure why you just don't bother. You know what I mean? I used to sort of coast through things. I'd just do enough to get through the lessons or homework and think, I can't be asked with it all. I were into going outside, I just like the outdoors. So homework and staying in, it wasn't for me.
I mean, were you somebody who wagged off? Were you absconded from school, or were you going, just not sticking in?
Yeah, I was going, but like on the lunchtimes we started. I mean, I mentioned it in an interview with Noel Razor-Smith a couple of weeks back, or maybe just before Christmas. We would always sort of go into town because the school wasn't that far for a walk into the city centre, robbing, stealing things, selling them back at school. On a night, I'd once took sort of like a coat out of a wardrobe at home, and the wire hanger like snapped, and I was sat on my bed playing with it, and then I got another one and made this sort of lengthened it, made another one and put a little hook on it, and we're messing about in my bedroom, sort of fish hooking things, and thought, I think that might work outside. There were no cameras sort of that time in town, so I'd go to like sports shops, stick it through the letterboxes, get to the sort of things that were on the dummies. Lacoste tracksuits, pull them through the letterbox, and then sort of that was the sort of thing I was selling at school. I'm 13, 14 doing that sort of thing.
Entrepreneurial, but I mean, were you ever worried about getting caught?
No. I kind of like, I went from that. I mean, that was just school. As soon as I left school, I tried a few jobs. I worked like glass blowing. My uncle would have worked in a glass blowers, so I was doing like glass blowing. I had to go at it, hard work. I always thought, oh, there must be something easier. Worked in a slaughterhouse, didn't like that. Worked doing like underpinning, digging down, but it was just, when you were more apprentice like age, so you had all the rubbish jobs. You were like sort of the batter boy, digging, filling the batters. It would all just come home covered in muck. You'd think, oh, there must be something better to do. So I kind of ended up. I ended up moving out with my mum's and I went to live with my uncle in town. And my uncle was a bit of a drinker, but he used to work every day. But as soon as he knocked off work, he was in the pub, and then he'd be pickled in the pub, and then I'd have to go get him. I was getting phone calls when I was at school saying, "Can you come and get your Martin? He can't make his way home." So I ended up sort of coming through subways and getting the idea to like rolling drunks, and it's all embarrassing now talking about it, but that's how I kind of started off, sort of progressing from what I thought were just petty sort of stuff to like a bit more serious, like mugging people. And I started with drunks, sort of following them home. "You all right, mate? I'll help you down here." Wallets, watches, that type of thing. And then it progressed even further from that to sort of, I got out of Wakefield, went to Leeds, and then I started like having like knives, machetes. When I was eventually arrested, I had like a machete like this, in the Leeds town centre, running around. Didn't really know. Wasn't until I got nicked and put in Millgard police station that when they were sort of saying, right, you're done for street robbery. I was like, in my mind then, that stupidly, I just thought I was taxing people, and I didn't think it was that. I didn't even understand charge, like at time. So
when you look back at that deal, can you rationalise why you chose this particular life? I mean, by your own admission, you had a good upbringing. Obviously, the dad not being there, you've already pointed to that as a potential, flag, a bit of trauma from your perspective, that your dad just wasn't around to give you the discipline. Your mum couldn't control you. But why progress from sticking a few, coat hangers together and swiping stuff and making a few quid at school, to then suddenly following people and mugging them?
Yeah, I don't know, mate. I mean, I was messing about on fringes of drugs as well at that time. So whether the drugs were messing with your head, I was smoking weed when I was young. We were always going to. I'd got to know Leeds because we were always up Chapeltown. We were always sort of, there were nobody. I mean, I'm going to sort of even when I was like 13, 14, we were sort of going up to Chapeltown. Pubs up there, they're gone now, like the Gaiety, the Hayfields, the Blues Club, Sunnies. We were going there and sort of hanging around, some of my mates. We were all off the council estates. My mum and dad had actually bought a private house by then, so I wasn't on the council estates, but I'd been on them. Everybody I knew were on them, so we just sort of like headed that way. We didn't think it was a dangerous thing to do, to be sort of going up and finding a load of black fellas selling weed. They were always seeing them like stab people in front of us, arguing who's going to sell you like 10 quid worth of weed. And you're thinking, I'm going to stab, so then you've got your knife. I think maybe it sort of progresses you, sort of like maybe with the Blazy. It was where we were going, we thought maybe we need a weapon, and it started from protecting yourself to then developing later on into me thinking, I can use this. My defence at court, where I used a machete because I was trying not to stab anybody, because I thought if I pull out a little knife, somebody might think, what? But I thought like the shock sort of factor, I know it sounds a bit backwards thinking, but I was trying not to hurt anybody. I was trying to more like shock you into it, so you just go, oh shit, and give me the stuff quick. The machete kind of had that effect on most people.
So, I mean, you're basically selling the stuff at school when you're selling those clothes, but the mugging of people, was that you mentioned drugs, were you funding your habit, or was that just
I think around that time, you're funding not an habit, but just funding like we're always into me designer clothes. I were always shopping in Leeds. And always needed money for clothes. I were always buying like jewellery. At school, we'd all have like, little gang of folk I used to go out robbing. We would all have a sort of sovereigns on and as chains like hidden. We'd be like, oh look, I got that other day from, we're doing that, and I went and bought that. Just to, like a child, just a silly, looking back, like I said, I'm horrified, man. It destroys me thinking, talking about it. Do you know what I mean? Like I say, I just try and stay as many people as I can out of, do a lot of stuff like talking to young'uns, trying to, just explain to them how stupid it is. Do you know what I mean? But like trying to get through to people at that age, I know how hard it was to try to get through to me. You know, even people, you know, people did try to say, you need to calm down. I'm just like, I just did. It's an hard age, I think, to get through to anybody, but you've got to try.
What age were you when you were finally arrested and you were charged with street robbery?
I was 17 by the time I got proper nicked, you know, and remanded into prison and things like that. 17 remanded, sentenced to 18, got 6 years. Got two.
Wow.
Well, it would only it wasn't 6 years. It was 2 years, 2 years. I got 3 charges eventually, and just got 2 years for each one. So I just did 2. Yeah, I mean, I went into prison. Like I said, I knew quite a few people when I landed in the jails. Didn't really mind. I don't know. I did mind, obviously, being away from home and stuff like that in a way, but it was just another sort of like a little adventure in my head at that sort of age.
What did your parents think?
Well, my dad was away abroad. My dad I think he was in Saudi Arabia, my dad at the time, so he would have killed me if he'd have been over here. My mum was just horrified. Mum's never had a parking, you know, my mum's never had a criminal record, never spoken to by police, never had any trouble in her life. So she was all like, you know, same with my uncles, you know, on my mum's side, no trouble, quite entrepreneurial really. My great-grandma was like a businesswoman in the 50s, built up like transport cafes and successful business landowners. So on that side, you know, there's like, I don't mean posh, but you know, like the people that have worked from nothing. They started in like Rowntree's factories at York, you know, the sweet factories, making enough money. Then she built a little shop. Then she bought some like buses from the West Riding and was selling like pegs and pans and rope and all that sweets as well, like getting the sweets discounted from Rowntree's, bagging them up and selling them on the markets and that type of thing until she eventually got enough money. Then she built a transport cafe. Then she bought all the sort of land at the back, houses, built my granddad and his brother like houses when they come back from the war. So, you know, that's my mum's grandma.
Did your mum support you through this? I mean, when you were first up in court,
yeah.
did she come to court and did she visit you on remand?
Yeah, all the way. You know what I mean? Which again, looking back now, at the time, I didn't even realise what you're putting your mum through. And again, that's another thing for people to talk to the young ones. It's not just what's happening to you; it's family and what you put. You know, like I said, my mum had never even been to a police station, so to go to Crown courts and magistrate courts and prison visits and, you know, search by, you know, sometimes I were on closed visits. You know, I've had like stuff like that with mum where we're speaking, you know, behind the screen, you know, like just on, not that phone, it used to just be like a little plastic sort of, well, you know, you said with prisons, it was just like something, you just lean into it and speak through it. And there were no like goodbye, no like, oh, goodbye. Or when I was in Northallerton prison, which they've knocked down, they moved me from Yorkshire because I won't behaving up in the Yorkshire jails. They moved me to Northallerton. I used to be on the top cell on the B. There were only A and B. There were a non-swing C wing where the gym was, but there were only A and B wing. I was on B wing, and I was up at the end, right on the end. And as you looked out, you could see like a little garage and a little roundabout, and I could get back from my visits and see my mum. She had a little Mini then, and I could actually get back to my cell, get up at the bar, and see her sort of like go around the Mini. I'd think, oh, I'll see you in 2 weeks, mum. You know, well, there were some good lads in there, though. Like I said, I didn't know all them. I met all the you know, like Middlesbrough lads, South Shields, you know, the Newcastle lads, Bury lads, mostly, well, that type of people. There were a few Scousers, a couple of black sort of Manchester lads, and then there were a couple of Yorkshire lads, and there were like 1 or 2 little Irish kids, and that was it.
Any renowned names that you came across when you had your spell inside? On
the first one?
Yeah.
I wouldn't say there was, because I don't know whether there is and they've gone on to become bigger things. You know what I mean? Like, I think maybe, I'm not sure at ages and stuff like that. When we were in Liverpool, there was some big lads in there. Do you know what I mean? When we were like sort of turning 21, but not until I got to adult prison later on another sentence did I meet like more
renowned figures. Yeah. Yeah. So obviously, you know, when you're away at such a young age, you know, you're either going to go one way or the other way. I mean, you know, did you keep your head down when you went in on that first sentence, or were you somebody who had to make a point? No. Were you provoked into something? What was that first few weeks like in prison?
I think like within days I was down block for fighting.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think in them days it was like, you know, you sort of, as soon as you get in, you know, I've been held in like Millgarth in Leeds on the robbery for ages. The robbery task force like were looking into me because they didn't believe that my record started at like hardly anything, and then all of a sudden I've jumped into like this robbery sort of stuff. So they were like looking at all the old unsolved cases around Leeds and Wakefield and Bradford, looking at if there were anything they could sort of tie me to. So I had quite a long like stretch in the police stations while they like come and talk to me, back to the cells, talk to me. I ended up with like two charges and an attempted charge. That was it. I didn't like TIC anything. I just said that was it, which it was. You know what I mean? I'll just say now that's all it was. So by the time I got into prison, I was straight down the block fighting, and it took me about 6 months, maybe 7-8 months before I started looking into the education classes and started having some like screws down the block. There was a big block screw called Mr. Derry, a big Irish guy. He was sort of like, he was in charge of the block, and then there were another couple of sort of stronghold boxes where if you kicked off in the block, you'd be stuck in there. And it was just like, once they sealed that, it was just a concrete tomb. It was only a little thing. They just sort of sit you in there for a day and let you cool down, and then they put you back in block cell. And then if you did your block time, you go back on wing. And he used to sort of talk to me, bring me pencils. This is where I sort of got into my artwork or into my writing. He used to bring me pads, pencils. You got to remember, like back in them days, it sounds like a pad and a pencil, but you didn't get anything then. There were no electricity. There were no, you know, it was like a PP9 battery and a little radio if you behaved yourself. Maybe a book or two out of the library. Most of the books had all the pages ripped out of it. Nobody was interested in like education. You know, like when I remember sort of going to my first night class, everybody else was on association, playing pool, playing ping pong, you know, having a shower, watching a film, chatting, playing cards, dominoes. You know, going to education, you were looked upon in Northallerton like a bit of a soft. It was like a soft, you know, it was like, oh, you're off to, who do you think you are? You know, it will look down upon, you know, to sort of try to better yourself. It was hard to sort of break that, oh, I'm not doing education, you know, because, like I said, the majority of people in there, I won't say they were thick and all like that, but they would just want, like, they want a massive, like, push to, like, oh, yeah, that's good, mate, go on with education, it'll be good for you. It was like, why are you going on education? Yeah. From the prisoner's point of view, you know what I mean?
Yeah, of course, mate, of course. You know, obviously, you know, you progressed through that sentence. I mean, did you have any time added on for incidents, or did you start to buckle down and do the education?
I lost a few months along the way, you know, like I said, just like nickings and stuff, or anything in them days. You know, you could get nicked for not having your shirt tucked in properly, or, you know, it was. I went from some of them, they tried me to another prison in Yorkshire again. They moved me like when I had about 12, 13 weeks left to do. They said, we'll give you a chance to go to like a more open prison and see how you progress. And within weeks of there, I robbed somebody of the watch, robbed the toiletries off them. You know, people, it were like, I think people were sort of like, you know, when you got your canteen day, like it's not like now where they're banging on the doors and like, oh, I ain't got me, you know, the stuff they get now and the menus and can order out the catalogues. It wasn't like that then, you know, it was like you get a bit of tobacco, or you'd get some batteries, or you might get a phone thing or some stamps or some toiletries, you know, like cocoa butter. People were like mad on that. All the black fellas loved that Palmer's cocoa butter were like a big thing. So you'd sort of go into the cells, stick a pillowcase over your head and rush in and take people's stuff. So I'd not really learned, really. I'd not really stopped robbing in that sense before I even got out. I'd got nicked again. They put me down the block. The governor come down and went, the bus come, and he went, I'd finished my block time, and he went, right, bus is here, take you back to Northallerton. And I didn't even like get back on the wing. He just went, you know, we've had enough of you here. You know, I had a watch on my hand at somebody's property. So I did my last 3 months in the block at Northallerton. I even got released from the block. They didn't even put me back on wing. They just took me to the block. And Mr. Derry walked me out, and my mum were in the car park at the back of Northallerton. There were a car park at the back. And then I come home, and then from there I just like flew straight to the Middle East and went to see my dad.
Okay, so what was the next step for you once you were released?
Just went to Dubai, Abu Dhabi. went living out there for a bit, just sort of hanging on the beaches, trying to get a feel for. I didn't really, again looking back now, I thought I didn't really appreciate that I'd made such a good switch, from I was sort of sat on the beach looking at paradise, and I was still thinking about people in jail and thinking about Wakefield and shall I get back to my old mates in Wakefield. I'd not really, I didn't really adapt very well. I should have, looking back now, I should have maybe lived there and stayed there a lot longer and let myself settle in. My dad could have got me, he had good contacts. I could have got good work there. I've still got friends there that I met 25, 30 years ago, you know what I mean? I've still got them friends with me now who offered me jobs then, and I was like, I'll just hang about on the beach. I don't know what were, maybe it's just trying to get the easy life. I think maybe after I'd done the prison, I felt for a few months, I thought I deserved to sort of take it easy, sit on the beach. It were all new to me, especially like a Middle Eastern country as well. So it was a big, going from Northallerton Block to the beach of Abu Dhabi, in your 20s, 21, it was a bit too much.
So, did you return, to England?
Yeah.
What happened then?
Come back to England, yeah. And then I was back in England for a little bit. I went, I can't remember where I went on holiday somewhere else again. And I was going to London a bit and seeing some of my friends. And then I was back up here. And then I got arrested again. Like a miscarriage of justice. I got this sent me off path for about 25 years.
So what was this? What was this? Can you go into that?
Yeah. I've just finished a book about it called Stitched. So I won't go in. I mean, it takes forever to go into it all, but the bare bones of it was I went out on a Sunday night with somebody I knew from back in school. We met this girl, went back to her house, slept with her. He sort of slept with her. About a week later or 5 days later, door come through. You're under arrest for rape. Said I'd not done it. Did my interview. Told him everything what I'd said. This other lad said the same thing. They said it were convenient that we'd said the same thing. Instead of saying, oh, well, it makes sense that you both said the same thing. It were more like straight away, everything just seemed to be against me. I just felt like even everybody around me just in the police station just didn't believe a word I was saying. Whether it was because, I'd only just come out of the robbery charges not that long back. But I don't know. But I got remanded straight away. The magistrate sort of seemed to sort of shit themselves. Do you know what I mean? As soon as we're only a little magistrates at Wakefield, as soon as they said rape, people remanded. Ended up going for the next one, didn't get bail. Went for the judge in chambers, didn't get bail. Thought, right, I'm stuck on remand. So I was stuck on remand for 13 months in Doncaster prison. I was at Moorlands first, but then they shut down Moorlands and they opened up that Doncatraz, the private run prison. So we were the first to sort of go in there. It was an easy jail. But again, with that sort of charge, you get the odd idiot. The majority of people were fine. And again, I knew some people from when I'd been in before. The first sort of people what I saw were like, I can't believe you're back in for robberies. And I'm like, I'm not, I'm in for rape. And they were like, no way. So I showed some people the depositions. I showed people what she'd said, what I'd said, trying to get some evidence around to some decent people in the prison. All the screws I showed it to, they were like, we don't understand why you're even here. We don't understand why it's got out of the police station. There were no evidence, not one single thing, except for her word against my word. But as like I said, it took me 25 years to write Stitched. Eventually, I tried to write it a few times, but it just sort of messed your head up, and I thought it's not worth, I'd get myself on an okay sort of level mentally, and I'd think, well, what's the point in messing your brain up that much going backwards? I tried
to go from being being in charge of street robbery to suddenly being inside for that. It sounds as if your mates in prison, the people who you got to know, clearly believed your share of events. How did the whole thing disperse? How did the truth come out that you weren't?
Well, like I said, it went on and on. It just went on like a nightmare, a living nightmare. I ended up, like I said, I'd 13 months on remand, and then we went to Crown Court, 5 days at Leeds Crown Court, found guilty. Again, didn't understand it. Like I said, if anybody wants to read the Stitch book, all the depositions are in there, all the eventual stuff when I got acquitted from the law lords at the Royal Court of Appeal, all that's in there. All the documents there. I've written the story, but I've also added all the documents in there so you can clearly see what's gone on. Found guilty, attacked the judge, tried to escape at Leeds Crown Court. The judge at the time, abandoned, the sentencing at the time, and, he was he ended up off his chair, under his chair, Group 4 screws, Armley screws, ended up getting bashed about quite a bit. And then I ended up back at Armley. I won 4 months on the bananas, on the escapee list. So it made it even, it wasn't just like I've been found guilty of something I've not done, and then I've also come from just at the date of the court. I went from being like a YOI prisoner. When I got to the first day of the trial, the bus went back for Doncaster, and I didn't get on it. And they went, "Oh, you've been lying about your age." I'd lied about my age for a few months because I thought I don't really want to go to the adult prison with this charge. I was only 21 at the time, so I was trying to hang on. So at some point I'd falsified a document, and I managed to blag it a bit. But when the first day of the trial, the bus come and he went, "Oh, Armley schools," went, "Oh, you're going to Armley, mate." So we're like, "Fucking hell." So it wasn't just like, like I said, you're only 21 years old. So I went to Armley, then I got found guilty, then I'm on the escapee list. Then as soon as I did 4 months on the escapee list, I thought, well, at least I can get on the wing and start trying to get some information out, about because I'd had a bit of shit off, like people shouting out the windows, and like you would do. I remember shouting it myself to people when I were in for the robberies. If you could, like I said, in Northallerton, there were A and B wing, C wing. On a night, you'd hear them all shouting, "Oh, you fucking idiots," and you'd be like, "Oh, if we could just get hold of them." They give it all out of the window because they know you couldn't get near them. You only really went near them if you went to the gym, and obviously the gym schools would be weird, so you didn't get no chance to get near anybody. So they were always like mouthing it. So I got a bit of stuff like that, but I also heard a few sort of rasters and things from Leeds like shouting out the windows and saying like, "It don't make sense," because it had been in all the papers when we tried to escape the Crown Court. So there were a lot of people saying, "Well, why would he try and, it don't make no sense usually." Rapists using, I suppose, their modus operandi is they put their head down, go down, and they get on with the sentence and they've been found guilty of rape. You don't really sort of attack a judge at Leeds Crown Court and try and escape. Again, when I went back for sentencing, I got 8 year, 3 months. I got 8 year for rape. I got 3 months for the contempt of court. The judge just said, instead of, in my mind, it was like, well, I've obviously done that because I've studied and I've waited for the system to see the truth, and I've stood in front of the system and it's let me down. So my instinct as a person is to run, to get out of here, because I've waited for the judge to say you're free to go, and when he didn't, when the jury come back and went guilty, I thought, my instinct was like, get out of here. I don't know where I was going, but I wanted to get out of that building. The judge, when he got us back in front of him, was just sort of like saying, well, it just shows the arrogance of you, shows that you're animals, because he'd like come off his chair, the judge, he'd fell on the floor, and there were like a carafe of water on the desk that had been smashed, and it was quite an heavy scene, like after a court case in Leeds Crown Court, like people had run out of the public gallery that were like our supporters and said things to the jury, saying, "Oh, she's just a lying piece of shit," and the jury were like ushered into the room, and that door was locked, and the jury won't come out, and the judge were on the floor, and the screw, it was a chaos. So
why would this woman? I mean, again, you might go into this in the book, but why would this woman make a false accusation against you like that?
Well, my barrister at the time is Rodney Jameson. He's now a judge at Leeds Crown Court. So I've got a quote in the book from him, like that he'd only ever, in 30 years with the law, he'd only had 2 miscarriages of justice, and mine were one of them. He couldn't figure it out. He kind of sort of said if you'd have maybe took a bunch of flowers the next day, we just felt she was like somebody scorned. She'd always been someone, we didn't know this about her until like all the stuff come out in court, like people, she'd called witnesses trying to shore up her story, and they like turned on her. We didn't even need any witnesses on the defence side to make her sound like a liar. Her own prosecution witnesses contradicted her themselves. Do you know what I mean? She contradicted herself from what she'd said in a statement. She made 3 statements. None of them continued to say the same thing, and everything that she'd said in her statements didn't match anything she said on the Crown Court dock. So nobody could figure out why or what she'd done. We just always assumed it was just, she wanted to. I think she'd split up with her boyfriend, something like that. She was upset. She sort of saw us as if we'd used her in some way. We'd done nothing wrong at all. I mean, I guess like when you're young, maybe we, didn't go around and, go around with the attitude that I was going to have a relationship with her. But I certainly didn't do anything at all that night to make anybody think you've done anything wrong. Like I said, when you go to the evidence in the book, she said that I personally punched her, kicked her, strangled her, kicked her in the back, and when she were examined, there wasn't a mark on her. She said that we left a mobile phone number for her when we left the house. On the way home, we bumped into a policeman at about 3 o'clock in the morning called PC Ward, and PC Ward, because he knew us from sort of being out robbing and stuff previously, were like, "What you up to?" And I was like, "Oh, you won't believe me if I told you." And he was like, "Try me." So we sat down and we were rolling a cigarette, and we said we'd had a free in a bed with this girl. I won't say where it is because I'm not allowed to legally mention. I've had to change certain things in the book, to protect people. I shouldn't have had that. I didn't want to be honest. I wrote all the book when I wrote it. I put all the names in, everything I wanted to say. I was willing to put it out as it was, but my editor said legally you need to just maybe rein it in a little bit, otherwise we don't want it taken off the shelf. This PC Ward, he come to court, bless him, the only one out of anybody that I thought did something from the authority side, come to court, and he said that when he saw us, we were calm, unconcerned, told him that we'd had a free in a bed with a girl in this certain area. Again, I mean, if you've just come from a brutal rape and you bump into a copper half an hour later, maybe you could sort of, if you were ice cold, blag that notes happened, but I don't think you'd point a policeman in direction at like a state and tell him exactly what you've just done in a sense that there's been a free in a bed with a woman, and then you're thinking, well, she's going to say, phone police, I've been raped by 2 guys and I'm from this area, and they're going to put that together pretty quick. So, things like that didn't ever make any sense, do you know what I mean? But they took his evidence at court, and the judge just were like, whatever. Everything we said positive at court, it was just quickly brushed past, and he just sort of dwelled on everything. If she got into trouble on the stand when she was contradicted, she'd just burst into tears. The judge would do you want 10 minutes to go outside and compose yourself? We found out later that she was even outside speaking to witnesses that were sat outside waiting to go in before they'd even been called in to give their evidence. For example, I've come up from the cells after 13 months on remand for nothing. When she entered the court, she didn't know that my mum and some of my friends and some of my mum's friends were waiting in the court. When she arrived in court, my mum said she was like a showgirl. When she arrived through the door, she went, "I star at shows here." I can't do it in a theatrical thing, but it was like a theatrical, ta-da, I'm here. That's how she entered Crown Court.
Wow. Did you have a right to appeal straight away?
Yeah, straight away. Like I said, luckily, went straight to appeal. But unfortunately, your first appeal goes back to the judge that sentenced you. So because of what had happened at court, I wasn't thinking much. I thought as soon as he gets this, he's going to, in his summing up, he said in all his career of sitting on the bench, he'd never had any case of contempt to court of that severity ever. So that's when they started putting them barriers up in courts. When they started putting all that sort of thing at magistrates, so you couldn't run at the judges. So that just got screwed up, and then it went straight. At that point, then we lost his legal aid. So then my family stepped in, and my dad paid for me to continue with my barrister, who's the judge now, Rodney Jameson. So he did all this perfected grounds appeal, and then it got sent to London, and then it was a waiting game. So by that time, I'd been moved to Walton at Liverpool. So I was up in Walton. That was hard. There was some crazy fuckers up there, do you know what I mean? And I did get into some like bad fights, you know, like because of it. And I mean like defending myself, people trying to do me some serious damage because of charge. There wasn't no like, let's say you out. It will like straight away what you're in for. I'd stop, you know, I never like said to anybody, oh, I'm in for burglary, mate. And then later on I were always up front and said, I'm in for rape, mate. And I ain't fucking done it. So, but sometimes that'd be a fight straight away. And then I spent another 30, I think about another 30, over at least a year, Steve, I was in Walton. And then I got my appeal through. And the first thing that I noticed on the appeal thing, it said that this matter should be expedited. Now, at that point, I didn't know what expedited meant, so I got the dictionary, and it meant like speeded up, you know, this. And so I was looking at that with a bit of hope, thinking, well, why would they put that this matter needs to be expedited? Why are they trying to speed it up? It seems like as soon as these 3 judges at London had seen it, that they were like, let's get this kid down here. So that was a positive thing. And then I got called into the office. It was like, I think it was like Christmas time. It was definitely snowing. And the PO and the SO and all the screws were in the office and called me and made me sign this document to say to make me aware that if I went down, I could be re-sentenced. If I went down and my appeal failed, that I'd start my sentence again. And I'd lose my 27 months that I'd done. So I signed all that. Again, all lads on wing said, you wouldn't have signed that. I was 27 months into an 8-year, 3-month sentence. Everybody were like, if you were a rapist, if there were any doubt, you would have just rode that out at this point. You know, I won't go to any. They were saying I was going to do all my time because I won't go to any. They wanted me to go on these courses. They wanted me to go to, like, you know, for your parole. They wanted me to go and stand up and say, I'm really sorry I raped this lass. You know, I won't do it again. I was like, I ain't fucking going on anything and saying anything. So I know I'm going to serve all the time. I probably would have never come out of prison if I'd not got acquitted. Anyway, I ended up getting down. I'd already just had my papers under my door to say I was on my way to Wakefield. As soon as a cell come available, I'm thinking, fucking hell, you know, I live in Wakefield. I know what's in Wakefield. So that's where I was heading. Then they took me to Brixton, and I wore, it was a 5-day appeal. On the day that we went down, the IRA blew up the Docklands. So it were all a bit, again, just adding to the weirdness of my story. I landed in London. The IRA just done the biggest bombing on the mainland. So all London were weird. Got into Brixton. Again, I had a problem as soon as I arrived in Brixton. They put me like the oldest cell. We were coming back. It was about tea time by the time I got there, and they put me in. And there were loads of people coming back from all the courts, and there were like a massive sort of black presence, and there were a few sort of weird white lads all hanging about. And I remember this. I was just sort of, they said get changed, and you know, you had your stuff, and I was getting changed. And this white kid, he kept looking at me, and I was trying to avoid his eyes. I'm thinking, just trying to get onto the wing. And I remember him sort of going, hey, what you in for, mate? And I went, rape. And he went, you better be fucking kidding. And I went, well, fucking I ain't kidding, mate. So I'm down here for my appeal. Anyway, this big black geezer that was sat next to me with a big dude stood up and he says, he says, fucking sit the fuck down, yo. Anyway, this kid, I didn't know who this black fella was, but he must have had some clout because this guy just went, sorry, mate, sorry. Just sat down. I thought, I was expecting it to be, I don't know why, but I was expecting, I think maybe you get it in your head, Brixton, all the black fellas are going to jump on my head. That was just sort of my mentality, you know, just, I don't know why I thought that, but I guess a lot of people who are white might think that. Going to Brixton, you might think, oh, it's quite predominantly a black sort of place where there's a lot of black prisoners and they're all like fucking dangerous sort of dudes from around that area. Peckham, you know, you've got all them in there, you know, you've got all the gangs in there. So with that sort of charge again, I was thinking, fucking hell, you know, this is, you know, like I said, I put up with it because I was thinking I'm going for my appeal. And then this black guy was like, don't worry about that, mate. You know, you know, I know all about like police and stitch-ups and all this sort of shit. So I kind of like befriended him a little bit, took me under his wing a bit, helped me get settled on the wing, and then they just give me like a little cleaning job. And I was 5 days on there, and then I went back and forth to the appeal court. The judges that I had were Lord Justice Stevenson. So I had like one of the biggest lords on my bench. I had Judge Gower, who's a big judge now, but he was the third, so he was the lowest on there. And then I had the guy that I can't remember his name, but he did the set. You know when Stephen Lawrence got stabbed?
Yes.
He wrote that. He was an ex-SAS guy. I forget his name. I should just look at the book. I've got all the stuff around me, Steve, to sort of get to when I. Like I say, you never know what's going to come on a podcast. So we've not even really touched on books much, but so they you know, I always sort of say, you know, I had like, it wasn't just like some, not that you're going to get some sort of low judges on them sort of benches, but I had like Lord Stoughton, Judge Gower, I had Sir William Macpherson. Sorry, that's who wrote the Macpherson report. Is like one of the most crucial documents written about, you know, like law that they did for the Stephen Lawrence case. They were the 3 judges that let me out. I was supposed to go from Monday to Friday. On the Thursday, they said, right, that's it, you're free to go. On the Thursday morning, the IRA again had put a bomb in the Charing Cross phone box, which is only down the road from the Royal Courts on the Strand. So I'd come down to London and the IRA had just blown it up. And on the day I come out, the IRA, 10-minute walk away, they put another bomb in this phone box, you know what I mean? So again, as I come out, it were all surreal. It wasn't like them sort of films where you come out to the microphone and go, I've served time. You know, it wasn't like in the name of the Father. You were just sort of let out of a door, got your stuff, got your paperwork signed, and I come out and it was like, right, where's train station? Everything was shut down. Ended up like getting in a pub and getting on the beer. Didn't get my train that night. Slept in King's Cross Station overnight and then got the early train back to Wakefield. Got back to Wakefield and within about 2 weeks again, I flew straight off to the Middle East again. And just thought, no.
I mean, to go through that, wow. I mean, how long did you actually? How long did you actually serve before the appeal?
27 months.
And I mean, you know, to you know, because you were innocent, to go through that whole time in prison. I mean, you know, talk about character building, Dale. You know, and you know, it's something which you've now put to good use. You know, you went off again to get your head, I guess, straight. You come back. How did the writing start? I mean, you clearly took courses in prison first time round, but how did this start?
When I went to the Middle East again, my head, you can imagine, we're all over the shop. So I ended up like getting with a Norwegian girl, and I ended up like moving from. I ended up flying, and then I ended up living in Stavanger in Norway. So I moved to Norway for a year. Got married in Derby, Burton-upon-Trent. Just a flash wedding. Just sat in a pub. Do you want to get married? She said it to me. Do you want to get married? Yeah. In my mind, I was again looking back in hindsight. I think I was just 1, running away, and 2, trying to protect myself, because I just, you know, like when you've had your door kicked in, and then all of a sudden it's not just like you go to the police station and you've got a day in cells and you come home and you think, God, that was bad. When somebody's totally like felt kidnapped out of my life, you know, like after 27 months, and not just that, facing maybe 10 and a half years in prison, which I'd have done if they'd have not given me acquittal. You know, I would have started my sentence again. I'd have done 10 and a half years. I would have gone back to Liverpool, and then I would have gone to Wakefield. So I reckon I'd have just been in Wakefield prison for a decade with that type of charge. I don't know what would have happened. You know, I don't know whether I'd have done something. I don't know. You know, I don't know whether I'd have just got lost into the system at that point. I think maybe I would have done. So yeah, I married this girl. It were all a mess. It should have just been a holiday romance. It went a little bit further. Ended up in the Middle East. Then I remember sort of like we split up on good terms, and I was like, right, I'm going to come back. I kept coming back. How you are? There were a ferry like from Stavanger to Newcastle all the time. So I kept coming back on the ferry to Newcastle, having a drink, getting the train back to Yorkshire, having a few weeks at home. Then we'd talk on the phone. Then I'd say, "Oh, come back." I'd go do the same. So we're doing that for like a year, back and forth from Norway. And then from there, I come back and I went for the compensation. I went round all the solicitors in Wakefield. I went like right into all the sort of Liberty and all these sort of charities and stuff that are advising people on how to like go on with a miscarriage. And I just felt I was banging my head against the wall. I wasn't getting anywhere. Solicitors in Wakefield didn't even seem to want to know about the case. It was just felt like shut down. Ended up finding one, went through all the Home Office. You go for something called a gratia payment. And I spent 7 years trying to get compensation, and I didn't get any compensation. They ended up sort of saying at the end, we're really sorry. We can imagine, we can, one of them horrible letters where you read and think, you've no idea what I've been through. but I was reading this thing saying, we're really sorry. We can only imagine what you've been through, but there's no compensation. Like, the Home Office only does certain things. And then that sent me in a spiral of drinking, because I felt then that people were sort of saying to me, well, if you were proper innocent, why didn't you get compensated? And I'm like, well, it ain't just me that don't get compensated. So there's thousands of people that have not been compensated. But it did still give me that feeling that there was something wrong with the case, and that I was like lying in some way, even though everything had been proved in the case and there were no evidence and I'd been acquitted. Because I didn't get the compensation, I still felt there was some sort of stigma. And then I went through a patch then of maybe 7 to 10 years of like alcoholic, definitely like an alcoholic, drinking, going to the courts all the time, going to the solicitors, trying to get. I was getting like a review of a review of a review, and it was just setting me off. And all my family were like, "Look, just leave it. You're not going to go up against this government. They're not going to do it. You've been acquitted. Just draw a line under it. Move on." But I just couldn't move on because I knew something serious had been done to me. I was like a dog with a bone. I was like, "No, I'm not fucking just moving on. You know, why should I just move on? I should be compensated. Anybody should be compensated for something. If they were dragged through that scenario, you should have been given, I don't know how much money, I don't know what sort of amount you could put on it, but you should be given something to help you maybe ease you back." But again, in hindsight, I'm glad I didn't get compensated, because I think at that point, if they'd have gone and given me a couple $100,000, I'd have probably killed myself with drugs, because my head was just a mess, because the process of trying to get compensation kept all this charge and all this like trauma stuck in my brain, and I didn't move on for a long time.
How did you get into the writing?
Again, I think therapy. So I'd been to some therapy. I'd ended up getting into trouble with the courts for like drunken disorderlies. I've got a string of drunken disorderly charges, damage charges, where I've been out. You know, I'd set off out all smart and being nice pubs. By tea time, I'd be in the shitholes drinking with all the rough-uns. You know what I mean? And getting locked up, fighting, and, you know, assaults with the police, things like that, just kicking off. So all I would do, the only thing I felt I had to cling on to when I first wrote the ink run. So I was starting to write the manuscript for this ink run story. I think what it was, Steve, is I think it was actually the stitched book, but I couldn't face writing it like in the first sort of person, and it was too personal. So I kind of twisted it into this other story that ended up, instead of sort of in prison, it were in an asylum, which a lot of prison feels like you're in an asylum. It were all a sort of revenge story, vigilante story. I kind of look back on it now and I can see that it was a Stitch book, but it was fictionalized because I couldn't bear to write stitched at the time. That's how I started. It would always be sort of my go-to, you know, like when I'd be with people, I'd be like, right, I'm going to get off. I've got to go work on my book. And people used to think, yeah, he's talking shit. You know, I'd be like, people, oh, you're working on your book. And for years, you know, people say, oh, you written your book yet? Yeah, I'm still working on it. Fucking hell, what is it, the Bible? You know, I'd be like, yeah, well, you know, I once sat down in a structured, how I write now to how I was doing that then. Totally different kettle of fish. You know, I once structured it with just something, I'd grab a pen and it was like my therapy, you know, writing things down and it maybe get some stuff out of my head. I'd leave it for a bit. I was still drinking a little bit, and then I sort of got back into the gym. I kind of snapped out of it the more I got into the manuscript, and I kind of got back in the gym. I used to box. I got back into the boxing. That's when we got back into. That's when the bare knuckle started. When we got into BBAD, all that sort of happened around that time. And then just as I'd sort of like I'd handwritten the manuscripts, 156,000 words, and I kept looking at it thinking, God, it was like a task to even think about editing it. I kept like putting it off, thinking, oh God, I can't face it. I don't even know if I've written a book. It just all seemed a jumble of stuff. I kind of knew there was a story, but I didn't have any real mapped out, you know, plan of what it was. And eventually took myself away to some caravans in the Yorkshire Dales, just people who I knew, friends, dropped me off a dumbbell, some soups, some pork pies, the manuscript, and I'd just go jogging on a morning, come back, try and put it into some sort of order. And I spent about a year sort of editing it, and then I got typing it, and I got 50,000 words into it, and then I got cancer. So again, it was like I just felt it was just as I got myself up first time actually functioning properly as an adult and behaving myself. There were no trouble with the police, no trouble with the courts, no trouble with any substance. I was working every day. I had a routine, I had a structure. I was back at my gym, and then I got bowel cancer. And I thought, fuck it, I just thought, I'm not getting away. At that point, I thought, my life's not designed to sort of like go right, in that sense.
The first book is always the hardest. I've been there, I've done it, I've got the T-shirt. What was the first book that you brought out, and how did it feel to see it in print?
I'll show you. So it went from, I did it like that, Steve. Halfway through, I just got a little thing printed out just so I could hold the book and think, right, oh, is this a book? Because like when it's on your laptop for years or paper, you just think, is this a book? So at the halfway mark, I just did that, and that gave me the motivation to keep going. Then I ended up, it's like a doorstop. So that's the ink run in hardback when it come out. Went from there. Then I got a paperback copy out. The only person I had backing me at that point was Noel Razor-Smith. Noel put Dale Brendan Hyde is an authentic voice from the street, a man who has lived the life and writes like he means it. The ink run is an extraordinary fictional debut and not to be missed. So Noel were backing me like at that point. Then from there, I went away from that publishers a little while later. Then I'm with a publisher in Philippines at the minute. So I redesigned the covers, redesigned the back. I've got Noel again on there still. I've got Paul Finch, Sunday Times bestseller, over 1 million copies sold. Paul Finch was an ex-Salford Bobby. So I like to sort of have that on there, sort of like give me a bit of backup. He's put his writing has an air of authenticity that other crime writers can only dream of. And then the best thing that happened like last year, I got a quote off Sean A. Cosby, which I put on the front. And Sean A. Cosby wrote a book called Blacktop Wasteland, Razorblade Tears. He's won LA Book of the Year. He's New York top 10 bestseller. He's won like all sorts of awards. You know what I mean? His books are getting made into major films with like major production companies, in America. I think it's like MGM that are making his film or something. It's like a major thing that's going on. And he gave me a nice quote to do with Ed Bunker. I don't know. Have you ever read Ed Bunker? Have you heard of Ed Bunker?
No, I haven't, but I know who it is. Yeah.
Ed Bunker wrote that, Steve. That no beast so fierce. Ed Bunker was an old-time American criminal.
Yeah.
Come out. He was Mr. Blue, if you remember in Tarantino.
Yeah.
Reservoir Dogs. So Tarantino put the best first-person crime novel I've ever read for about Ed Bunker. And then Sean A. Cosby on my book put, like Ed Bunker's debut novel, No Beast So Fierce, the ink run clamps its massive hands on each side of your head and forces you to stare into the pulsating wound that lives in the deepest parts of the darkest hearts. So, I've got, like, from going from that sort of thing, that's Sean's first book. That's Blacktop Wasteland. He's got on the front of there, he's got Lee Child, sensationally good, new, fresh, real, authentic, twisted with characters and dilemmas that will break your heart. So I've not quite got like Lee Child on the front, but I've got people backing me that have got Lee Child on the front. I've got people sort of giving me nice quotes that are doing well with themselves, and they've got Sunday Times bestsellers, New York Times bestsellers. So that was my first book, Steve. Yeah, that was the ink run.
And that's the big one. Once you've done that, it's hard. Did you? Yeah. I mean, like, without boring the audience too much, because like nothing worse than two authors talking. But ultimately, I always found the second one the hardest because it's finding that motivation again to sit down and write again. And that was what I found really hard. And it was a 6-year gap between writing the Geordie Connection and doing the second book. And once I broke the back of the second book, I found it easy after that. But did you find it hard to write the second, or did it naturally?
Yeah, it was kind of like sort of, it were almost like, do I want to continue writing? Was the ink run just that, like I said, that sort of therapy? Yeah. And what it just going to be like? I've done it, and I'm going to go and now get a job or do something else. I didn't know, but again, writing seems to take over. You either are a writer or you're not, and you don't seem to get much of a choice in it. You either, I'm always picking a pen up. I'm always writing notes down. I'm always typing things. I'm always saving things in notebooks, thinking, "Oh, I'll use that." So yeah, I went from that stage to. I didn't want to do anything too big the next, because that, with it being it was like an epic novel, like over 100,000 words is epic. It was 156,000 words. So I thought, I don't want to start a big novel. I always kind of thought about that Stitch book, but again, I didn't want to dive into that. I wrote some notes about it, but every time I did it, it just brought back all the trauma, and I used to just put it back away and think, I want to deal with it, but I obviously can't still deal with this. I used to sort of think in my mind, I've got over it. But then if I started talking, let's say on the news, something had come on, man found guilty of rape, it'd fuck my head up. Just getting about my day, I'd be in a good mood, and then I'd hear something on radio about rape. And it'd, get in my mind, and I'd be like transported back to trauma. And I'd not really got over it. So I went back to what I'd first done when I was writing like poetry when I was young. When I come out, I got back to college in between all that sort of going to the Middle East, coming back. I got back into college. I went back and did my GCSEs again, because I'd not done them at school. I had to do my GCSEs to get onto my A-levels. Did my A-levels to get to university. Got into university, but then I come out of university pretty much straight away and thought, it's not for me. I just think it was like one of them, coming as a kid, coming from not doing well at school, it was like, oh, I'll get into university. But I think it was just a point to make. I didn't like the setup of university, how they were going to be studying. So I come out of it. I didn't bother with it. I did the poetry book first, put that back out, and then I thought about like that trauma, like I said, in between going for the compensation, where I'd messed myself up on the drink. I'd caused myself no end. Whether that's what caused the cancer, it could be. That 10 years I was living hard, drinking whiskey, drinking Guinness, getting a Guinness and sipping top and pouring whiskies into the top of my Guinness and drinking. I was drinking like that all day, Guinness and whiskies in top of my Guinness. So I wrote The Whiskey Pool. It's just a short story, but it's like a self-help book. It's for anybody. It's mainly pointed at alcohol and alcoholism, but you could use it for any sort of addiction. But it's a nice. It just says on the back, The Whiskey Pool is a short story about the troubles of a man dealing with the horrific addiction of alcoholism. It is also a story regarding the circle of life that we inhabit and the stages of rebirth necessary to finally reach nirvana. So I'd got into sort of like Buddhism, I'd got into spirituality. I think when you've had addiction, you maybe like go looking for all these, like, you go looking for anything that'll help, you know what I mean? So I took loads of different things. For 6 months, I'd be like into yoga. Then I'd not do any yoga for 2 years. Then I'd be into like Buddhism. Then I'd be into Zen. Then I'd like get a bow and arrow. I'd be into archery, Zen archery. I'd go through all these stages. I've always been a bit of a like, eclectic in like that sort of thing. So I put it all into that. It's not just about that. Like I said, it's quite a well thought out short story. But the central point of it is like to help anybody deal with if they're drinking and they need some sort of like ideas to maybe where to go to or books to read or things that I found helpful for me. Whether that works for them, I don't know, but at least it's something to maybe have a look at if you are struggling with that. So I did that. And then I finally got to what you'd put up. I finally got to the Stitch book. Again, I wrote another book first. I wrote another novel. I started with something called The Death Row Thrift Shop. It's like another crime fiction novel. It's set in Ireland and then it goes over to Texas, a small little town called Dripping Springs. So I've been doing loads of research about some of these serial killers that have been around, but they think that they've been executed, but they've not. They've executed innocent people. Again, the innocent thing comes into my writing, into my work, into my research, and I developed a little story like that, but then halfway through it, I kind of got a little bit onto this, and I thought, actually, I can write it. I won't get into any point where it would do me head in. I thought, I'm actually flying through it. I got Stephen French to write the foreword for me. I asked him for a quote for it, and he said, "Is it about that? About the rape thing?" And I went, "Yeah." He went, "I'll write the foreword for you." You know what I mean? And fair play to him. Stuck his neck out on my book. sensitive subject. But again, when you read it, you'll only have nothing but hate for the system, because there's no evidence, and there's nothing. It's not just there's no evidence, and it's like, well, maybe it's their word or their word. The stuff in here shows you clearly that there's nothing but a liar on one side and somebody telling the truth on the other side, and the evidence can't be disputed how it is. And it's not just me like writing it and going, well, you have to take my word for it. It's got all the court documents in there. It's got all the appeal documents in there. It's got everything in there that you need to see to think, how did this even get out of a police station? So I did that, Steve. Yeah.
Listen, it's great to see that you've managed to get over one of the biggest hurdles that life can ever throw at you, and especially clearing your name as you did. It's a hell of a life change. What have you learned from that, and what does the future hold for you, Dale?
Well, I've been working on another book. I've been working on a guy's book, an autobiographical book called Easy Target, but he seems to suffer from sort of mental health problems. So 1 minute we're on, next minute we're off. I'm more or less, it's quite frustrating, because I'm about 60,000 words. It's pretty much done. If I spent a week with him, we could get it up onto Amazon and out. But he's gone off track before Christmas. I don't know what the problem is. It's not a problem from my end. So I've just sort of like thought, I've started something else. I've started another short story called Quentin Calling, which is all about, it's a short story to do with, I won't go too much into it because I haven't really developed it that much, but it's to do with like Quentin Tarantino. He's doing that. He's only doing 10 films, and that's what he said. He's going to do 10 films. He's done 9. He's on number 10 next. He's not said what he's doing. So it's like a screenplay type phone call where he phones up me and he's like, "Oh, is this Dale?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh, it's Quentin." I'm like, "Fuck off, mate. It's not Quentin." He's like, "It is. Listen, I spoke to someone in LA that had read the Incrum book and they give me it, and I looked at the Ed Bunker quote and it made me think of Ed Bunker, who was one of his favourite authors, and how he'd like made him play the role of Mr. Blue. And I looked you up and I looked on YouTube and I've read some of your stuff and watched things like this and heard your life story, and I'm interested in like filming the Incrum." And I'm like, "What?" And I've always been wanting to do some of my books into film. So it's a back and forth conversation, but it's all the stuff where it just seems to be writing itself. Every time there's a connection to me, I can connect it back to this Quentin Tarantino, and then he can connect it back to me. And like I said, I won't go on about it, but it's just at the minute it's a short story, but it might turn into a novel. I don't know yet.
No, great stuff, mate. It's great to see you so busy. Well, just a quick reminder for everybody, just the books that people can pick up. The Ink Run, which Brendan has showed there, and we've also got The Gods Are Watching, which is the poetry collection. We've got this book here, The Whiskey Pool. We've also got Stitched with the foreword by Stephen the Devil French. You can pick them all up on Amazon. The links are below. Well worth keeping an eye on what Dale has got to offer over the next 12 months or so. Dale, absolute pleasure. Have you got a message for anybody out there who I guess is watching today, who wants to get themselves into writing? Because the old adage is, there is a book within everybody. Have you got any advice to anybody who's thinking about starting off?
Yeah, I'd say just like stick to what you know, maybe to start with. It's so easy to sort of like get a little bit like far-fetched, start thinking, I'm going to write this Chicago crime novel, and you like live in Middlesbrough. Maybe stick to like some sort of like place, maybe stick to some people, do you know what I mean? And write something that's a little bit easier to like adapt for you, instead of getting too much into research or too much into your imagination to start with. You can always develop things later down the line, or at least start with things that you know about and then develop it from there. Don't try to jump into something that you know nothing about. Maybe that's the best advice I can give, because that's how it seems to be for me. When I look at the first 4, it's like the Incrum, or like the Stitch book I was trying to write. The Whiskey Pool is the portion of my life where I had trouble with the alcoholism. The poetry is what I've always been interested in and done. And then Stitched is like the account of the autobiographical miscarriage of justice account. And then I've kind of got all that. It's like you sort of dredge up all the stuff that you're doing that's bothering you. I've got all that out. It's kind of like vomiting it all out. Now I feel like clear to think, what do I actually want to write now? I can write whatever I want. I know how to write. I've got enough experience of writing now, so I can. Like I said, I'm writing something about Quentin Tarantino phoning me up and making a film. So you can, I think, just start with things that are maybe personal to you. If you've got something that you want to get out, do it that way first.
Dale, fantastic to catch up with you, mate. Best of luck with the writing, mate. I'm glad things are back on track. I know every day can sometimes be a battle when you've been through what you've been through, but you're making great inroads. Best of luck, and thanks for joining us on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me on, Steve. God bless, mate.
Take care, mate. God bless.